Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to our Bible class this morning. Glad you could join us. We normally don't introduce Roger for a Bible class, but since we have a guest speaker, we thought it'd be nice to introduce Joshua to you. This morning, we welcome Joshua Ball and his family, Morgan, Charlie, and Oliver. They're going to be spending the day with us. Joshua will be teaching the adult Bible class and then speaking at the morning and evening assemblies. He's going to continue the study of the book of Ecclesiastes that Roger started 2 weeks ago, and invite you to give him your attention and see what he has to share with us today. Joshua?
It is a pleasure to be here with you all this morning. I know I grew up down in the Ohio Valley, so anytime I get an excuse to come down here and to be able to see the beauty of the hills, of course I am very, very excited about. But I know already looking around, I've got several familiar faces that I know that it's good to be able to see, and I'm just happy to be here. So before we get into our class and looking at Ecclesiastes chapter 2, why don't we have a word of prayer? If you'll bow with me, please. Righteous and holy Father, we are grateful for this morning. We are grateful for the opportunity to set aside the things in our lives that distract us so, responsibilities, just everything that keeps us from focusing on you. And this morning we ask that our hearts and our minds be attuned to your presence and be attuned to your word, that we might grow, most importantly with you, but as we do so, that we will grow with one another in Christian fellowship. We ask that you please be with me as I lead this class, that allow the things that are taught be what are right with your word. But may all of us be challenged to look at your word and to see the truth of you, of what you have shared alone. Thank you for all you do. Be with us this morning, and in Jesus' name, amen. So, speaking with Roger about the class, I know you guys have been studying Ecclesiastes. And Ecclesiastes is a fantastic book of the Old Testament, one of the great pieces of wisdom literature, and it's unique. There are some parts in it that are tough to handle, but it is all very encouraging. And so I believe this is now the third week that you guys are looking at the book. I believe the first week was an introductory matter, and then last week was chapter 1, and so now we get into chapter 2. Now, whenever the Bible was put together, and God inspired the Holy Spirit God had the Holy Spirit inspire the writers, the chapters and the verses were not a part of the Bible. That was added in later. But they did a really good job whenever they separated the chapters in Ecclesiastes, because chapter 1 functions as a very good overview of the book. And then chapter 2 gets a little bit more descriptive, and it will carry on after that for getting into some of the weeds. One of the best parallels that I can think to this would be in Genesis. And Genesis kind of has this broad overview about creation in verse 1 of chapter 1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth was without form and void. But then it gets in a little bit more detailed. He goes in and he starts talking about day 1, day 2, day 3. It goes through that. But then after that, it goes even more in depth by breaking down how Eve was created and things like that. It's just getting from a broad perspective, and we're getting a little bit more detailed as we go on. Chapter 2 is a nice little transition point from the broad chapter 1 to the rest of the book, which is going to be a lot more detailed. Chapter 2 is a great, a solid introduction to the book. So it is, the discussion is about worldly pursuits. And the author here, who I do believe that it is Solomon, it fits the bill as Solomon, because he talks about being a king and having wisdom and having lots of riches. And he's going to explain some of those riches here in chapter 2. And there are three things that he is going to address in here that are talking about his pursuits. He's going to have a pursuit of pleasure seeking, of hedonism. He's going to have a seeking of wisdom, and he is going to go on and pursue pretty much anything that he was able to get his hands on, he wanted to pursue. So let's start talking about hedonism. So hedonism, he is discussing all of the different physical pleasures that he can get his hands on. I use the ESV, and so the readings that I have up here are from the ESV. But in verses 1 and 2, he sets the theme when he says, I said in my heart, come now, I will test you with pleasure. Enjoy yourself. But behold, this also is vanity. I said of laughter, it is mad, and of pleasure, what use is it? He's going to explain what some of those pleasures were here in just a minute. But this sounds like something that you would hear today easily. About do what makes you happy. All right. I enjoyed a TV show, Parks and Rec, and they had some characters on there that talked about treat yourself. All right. Just do what is nice. Now, there is a time and a place where we absolutely should take advantage of the blessings that God has given us. We're not all supposed to go around and be miserable on purpose. Although sometimes I think we can make that an art form if we really want to be miserable. But we can enjoy things, but at what cost and for what purpose? He really is saying something that is just as applicable in the 21st century as it was in his day. And so he starts describing the ways in which he sought pleasure. In drink and folly is how it's expressed here. He said, I searched with my heart how to cheer my body with wine, my heart still guiding me with wisdom, and how to lay hold on folly, till I see what is good for the children of man to do under heaven during the few days of their life. All right, what he is talking about here is wine. And whenever wine comes up in the Bible, it can be tricky to figure out the meaning because sometimes it means alcoholic wine and sometimes it means just regular grape juice, drinking something here. In context, probably talking about alcohol here. Just because he's talking about folly. And I don't know how much we could consider it folly if we're drinking some Welch's grape juice. That's not really a foolish, dumb thing. You don't look at somebody drinking a bunch of grape juice and you say, well, that person's real foolish. No, this is definitely going down a path that he should not be going. But notice that he is intent on doing wrong. He said he wants to figure out what folly is like. He wants to know, and he starts describing it compared to the people of the world. He talks about the children of man, seeing the things that the children of man do in the short days that they have, or the few days of their life. When he is talking about the children of men, that back in Genesis is a reference to people of the world. All right, whenever there was the sons of God married the daughters of men, and that was what led to the world becoming corrupt before God sent the flood. That is the idea here. Whenever you see the of men or of God, we're talking about people that have that quality. All right? And these are people that have the quality of humanity and not of godliness. And so what do people of the world do? They like to drink. They like to drink a lot. Now, I obviously don't go to bars. I have been to locations before where there happens to be drinking, and I can tell you that people go down that path, and it doesn't make any sense to me. But man, the world elevates. They talk about the heroes of drinking wine in the wisdom literature also. There are people that make it their livelihood, their source of enjoyment is just that. One of my examples, so I did mission work in China for a year. Whenever I had a break over there, I was able to go over to Japan for a couple weeks. And probably one of the best trips I've ever gone on. But when I was in Japan, I stayed at a hostel. And I'd never done hostel staying before, but it's really interesting because it's just bunk beds in a room and just random strangers just sleep there. It was actually really clean because it's in Japan. But I met some very interesting folks there. My routine, because I was over there by myself, my routine was I'd get a good night's sleep, and then I would have all these tourist destinations that I would want to see the next day. And I'd say, oh, there's a park with monkeys over here. I want to go do that. So there's this famous tower over here. I want to go see that. And I would set off on my stuff. But one of the people that I met that was there, actually a group of them, they wanted to just do the nightlife. They would sleep all day long just to go out and party at night. And then they would come back in the morning and just be completely drunk, and they would just fall asleep. And the only thing that makes no sense to me at all, when you're in a foreign country and can see all of these beautiful sights and everything, you're only out at nighttime in a place that is just a box with a bunch of neon lights and music. Like, I don't understand it. But the world elevates that kind of thing. And so here, Solomon is saying that I dedicated myself to figuring it out. I'm not happy where I'm at, so I might as well look somewhere else to see if I can find enjoyment and purpose. But I like that he's acknowledging that it's folly. I mean, he's saying straight up, I want to act a fool. I want to know what that is like. I have, for the last 8 years, worked as a college minister. And I got to tell you, that is the case for a lot of people. Sometimes they realize it, and sometimes they don't. But in our lives, obviously, we need to be very mindful that we are not pursuing folly and foolishness in such a way. So, I know I talked with Roger ahead of time about this class, and the nature of it kind of is not Q&A. I am A-okay with questions. If you do not mind yelling from your seat and asking a question or making a comment, I would love it, okay? It's got to be loud enough, and I might need to repeat it back to you all. But if you have any comment or any question during this class this morning, please just pop up a hand or just start at it, and we'll work with it. So going on, he then decided, all right, he went down the path of wine. Now he is going to go down the path of luxury. So it says in verses 4 through 6, he says, I made great works. I built houses and planted vineyards for myself. I built myself gardens and parks and planted them with all kinds of fruit trees. I made myself pools from which to water the forest of growing trees. He made a luxurious environment. Now, I don't understand the wine and the foolishness part. I kind of get the garden part, though, because that's pretty. And I think we enjoy gardening. If any gardeners here enjoy such a thing. I like trees. I really enjoy trees. If I can go to an arboretum and look around at all the different kinds of trees that are growing, I'm going to be a very happy person. I can understand where he is coming from whenever he is wanting to have all of this beauty around him. But you get into a question of how many houses does somebody really need? How many trees does somebody need? If you notice here, it's not just a matter of building a house. He wants to have nice things around that house, and so he's got to build nice trees. But then once you have the trees are going to die if they aren't taken care of, so what are you going to need to do? You're going to have to build pools of water to be able to water the trees. And once you do that, who's going to take care of it? Well, that leads into the next section where he starts hiring people. What we are noticing here is a bloat and an inflation of want. All right? Pick up on this trend already. What we are seeing is an inflation of bloat, of needing and wanting more and more things. So he starts to hoard people. He's hoarding trees. Yeah, he wants all the fruit that comes from that too, but he's going to have people to take care of this. So he says and so it's in the first part of verse 7 and the last part of verse 8 is when he's talking about the people. He says, I bought male and female slaves and had slaves who were born in my house. I got singers, both men and women, and many concubines, the delight of the sons of man. This is curious. So whenever you gain power and you are growing in your influence and ability to do things, you start running out of interesting things to do. And eventually it comes at the point of exploiting other folks. We are in a very curious time in our culture and in America. Whether you or I individually agree with what society is feeling about the workplace environment and the nature of the rich and the poor, we can at least see that the world is talking about that right now. We have billionaires that are flying into space trying to outdo one another on things. And meanwhile, Elon Musk, Elon is Tesla, and then Jeff Bezos, there we go. Jeff Bezos with Amazon. Here you've got a guy that's literally doing space tourism, which is his money, he can do what he wants. He's doing space tourism. Meanwhile, there were individuals in Kentucky that were working for Amazon at the time, and they were told, if you stop your delivery truck right now, even though there's sirens going on, you are going to be fired from your job. And there were people at Amazon that died because they were threatened that they were going to be fired if they quit. That should raise some questions in our hearts. Whether we agree with things or not, we can definitely see that there is a vast disparity here. And whenever here's one person now that has all of these possessions, who's going to take care of all of his possessions? He is going to have people take care of them. But these aren't servants. Whenever he's talking about slaves here, he's not talking about people that he is compensating well. He wants to pay them the least amount of money as possible. In this case, zero. A place to live. So be grateful. And how dehumanizing is it when that happens? Now, money does not mean that you are automatically going to treat people awful. That's not how that works, okay? Abraham had some servants too, but we can have possessions, but know that whenever you don't have to deal with the world's problems anymore, it can make us completely separated from people that do have to suffer through life. All right, there can be a vast gulf that appears where people don't appreciate what it takes to live life as a normal person. Unfortunately, Solomon appears here to have been disconnected in such a way, and he starts treating people like property. That should be a thing that revolts us. And if the Lord ever blesses us with great financial gains, that should be something that we should keep an eye out for, that we are not treating other people so poorly. I remember reading it was a study. It was talking about Monopoly. And they had a study where they had different kids, and they were playing Monopoly, and they gave some kids at the beginning, very obviously, they're like, hey, by the way, I'm giving you an upfront cost of $1 million, $2 million, whatever it was, in the game, a whole lot of money, and then somebody else, and they said, now play the game. Inevitably, the person that had, the kids that had all that extra stuff, they won. But what's important, though, is that those kids then, afterwards, when they were asked, why did you win? They said, well, I just worked harder than everybody else. Not realizing you have been blessed. My point is don't feel great jealousy for finances. What means is have a heart of openness and kindness with the things that we have. I guarantee you each and every person in this room is rich in God. We are blessed in one way or another. The question is are we being mindful of those blessings and sharing those blessings with people around us in need? He also had concubines. Solomon had 700 of those. That's why I think this is Solomon. Not a good thing. That's a far, far, far cry from what God originally planned with having one man and one woman together. It's very disappointing that happens. But he's hoarding more possessions as well. He said, I also had great possessions and herds and flocks more than any who had been before me in Jerusalem. I gathered for myself silver and gold and the treasure of kings and provinces. He collected all of those things, and it was never enough. Another study, and I wish that I could quote the actual thing to you, but I remember learning about this back at my time at Freed Hardeman. But they did a study on people and their income and what they wished that they had. And what they found was that most people across any monetary position, whether they were dirt poor or whether they were the mega rich, they said, if I only had 10% more than I'm making right now, I would be fine. That never ends. Understand what I'm getting here. And this is the vanity aspect that I think that Solomon is getting at. Is we are saying, if I only make 10% more, but once you make that 10% more, guess what? You only need to make 10% more. And you only need to make 10% more. There is literally no end to greed. I'm going to say that again. There is literally no end to greed. There will never be a number that we are going to be satisfied with externally. The only way that we are ever going to find satisfaction is by looking at what God has given us and being appreciative for the things that we have now. Now, my question to you then is it wrong to work harder and to seek to have a more comfortable lifestyle? I would say it's okay to do that. We are absolutely permitted to live and to try to find success, but are we doing so because we believe that will give us the answers, or are we doing that for trying to do the best that we can and try to be able to take care of other people as well? We need to not hoard for the sake of hoarding. We should hoard for a purpose, to give to others, to take care of other things. We, with Buckeyes for Christ, were able to go down to North Carolina several years ago for hurricane relief. And when we went down there, we stayed with a family that had this big house. It was a very, very large house. But they made a comment, and that has stuck with me here all these years later. They said, we knew when it was time to move, we were thinking about what we wanted and needed. And they said, we know this house is large, but we bought it with the intention of doing this. We wanted to be able to host people so that they can go and do different things when they are coming in town. And I went, that is awesome. That is great. That is the attitude that we need to have. It is working for a purpose, working for something greater than just ourselves. So he sought all of this stuff, and his results for it, he was better than anybody else. He was he was unsurpassed. So I became great and surpassed all who were before me in Jerusalem. Also my wisdom remained with me. Humility, too. And whatever my eyes desired, I did not keep from them. I kept my heart from no pleasure, for my heart found pleasure in all my toil, and this was my reward for all my toil. Toil is an interesting word to use, and it's going to become a point here. The toil is work. Work. He worked to have all of these pleasures. That was his destination, and he had an investment into it. Now, this might come off as braggadocious, because it is. This is braggadocious on what he is saying here, but he is doing it, I believe, for a purpose. There is another parallel that I can think of where somebody is bringing up all of these accomplishments and is talking about how great they are, but they are doing it not to actually pat themselves on the back. If you can think of who that is, in the New Testament, Paul. In the New Testament, Paul, especially in 2 Corinthians, among other places, will describe his qualifications. He starts talking about, hey, of all of the Pharisees, I did it really good. I followed the law. I did all of these things. I was in the greatest sect there was. And he mentions all these things, but he is not bringing them up just to say, look at how good I am. He is bringing it up to show that, hey, I am a person who has achieved these things that everybody thinks that they want, and I am here to tell you it doesn't mean anything compared to Jesus Christ. I believe that is what Solomon is bringing up here, the preacher, is mentioning all of these things because sometimes you need to have a fence post to be able to know where things lie. It's like, well, I need money. I want more money. I want that more 10%. Here's a guy that's saying, look, literally nobody has had more money than I have, and I got to tell you, it was never enough. He is that mark for us by which we can look at ourselves and say, well, maybe he's got a point. That is the purpose here for being braggadocious about things. So he was unsurpassed, and his realization was it was all vain. Then I considered all that my hands had done and the toil that I had expended in doing it. Behold, it was all this vanity and striving after wind, and there was nothing to be gained under the sun. I am sure that this was brought up in previous classes, but the phrase under the sun, my best understanding for it is talking about life without God. There is life under the sun, and then there is life under the sun. S-U-N and S-O-N. Those are two different things. Under the sun is just this physical life. And he's saying in this physical life, if you disregard God and holiness and goodness and just look at this life, he said this pursuit is pointless. He found that it was vain. It was like grasping at a vapor or a mist. You can't get a hold of it. It's elusive. It is disappointing. And that's how he feels about all of this. And I believe that his reasoning for it is he said it's the work that it takes. Now, among other things, I think the dehumanizing nature of his actions are definitely up there. But he talked about the work aspect. I remember somebody bringing up an analogy at Fried Hardeman. He was preaching one time, and he mentioned buying a swing set. And he said he went out and he built this swing set for his kids in the backyard. And, okay, it's like, hey, I got this, and, you twist in this. And he's so proud of this big swing set that he has made for his children to go play on. And as he was reading through the instructions, then at the end of the instructions, it made a note saying that for every 2 weeks, as long as you own it, you're supposed to go in and tighten all the bolts again. And he was like, I just wanted a swing set. I didn't realize I was signing myself for a lifetime contract with the swing set to tighten the bolts. Now, I'm pretty sure that's just something that they're writing on there for covering their own rear ends about people getting in trouble and it breaking apart. But whenever he bought a swing set, he was also buying into a commitment for all of these things. That takes effort and work and upkeep and all of the above. In our life, whenever we gain things, yes, it is a wonderful blessing to have a car. Cars take money and time at a mechanic. You can be a homeowner, but man, when the plumbing goes out, you're going to have to hire a plumber or learn how to do plumbing pretty quick. There is a ceaseless amount of work and toil that we have to put in if we want to have things. And you got to find a right balance for that. Supposedly, whenever Hawaii was first visited by Americans before it became a state, there was this perception that Hawaiians were lazy. And because they just were out surfing and laying around on the beach all day and, not doing anything. And here's this really lazy culture over here, and you all need to learn a better lesson. Not realizing they had a culture of waking up at like 6 a.m. and doing all of their work before noon so that they could have the rest of the day off. They understood that, hey, I got to do work for the day, but I really want to work for this leisure afterwards, so I'm going to work really hard now so that I can enjoy it later. You're going to have to find that balance in your life. You're going to have to find how much work are you really willing to put in order to get things that you want. But even then, realize the things that you want are not really going to bring you happiness. But there are definitely some simple pleasures in life to go for. Any thoughts or questions or comments? All right. So, hedonism didn't pan out. So he switched to wisdom. Well, he said his wisdom remained with him, so this one should be pretty easy. So he wants to pursue wisdom. So he says, so I turn to consider wisdom and madness and folly. For what can man do? For what can the man who comes after the king? Only what has already been done. This will obviously ties into there's nothing new under the sun. Everything that has been done will be done. He's saying, hey, he's put in all of this work, he's done all of these things, but things are going to have to be left for somebody else. So he's thinking about what happens with these possessions and how smart am I being on doing things the way that I am doing them. And so he's going to take a little shortcut and talk about the importance of wisdom here. So he says, then I saw that there is more wisdom, or more gain in wisdom than in folly, as there is more gain in light than in darkness. The wise person has the eyes in his head, but the fool walks in darkness. So he's saying, if I just dedicate myself to doing some foolish things as well, overall, wisdom is going to be the much better way to go. Because if you can imagine stumbling around with your eyes closed in a dark room, you're going to get lots of stubbed toes, lots of pain and frustration. Not really the best thing. And so he said it's a good thing to become aware. Now, wisdom versus knowledge. All right, knowledge is the ability to just take bits of information and to remember them. Like you believe them and you remember them and you keep them in your head. That is not the same thing as wisdom, which is acting out things which are right and good. I think one of the best explanations for wisdom and knowledge is, knowledge is knowing that a tomato is actually a fruit and not a vegetable. Wisdom is knowing not to put it in a fruit salad. It's practical application of how you use that knowledge that matters. And so he's saying, yeah, it's a good thing to know these things and to act upon them because you are not going to be in as much pain. So yeah, okay, I've tried to be a fool and it really is not too good. Just don't do it. But he's going to get depressed because why should we be wise? Why should we be wise? Well, it's not because it's going to necessarily always make you live longer. In verses 14, the latter half through 16, it says, And yet I perceived at the same time that the same event happens to all of them. Then I said in my heart, what happens to the fool will happen to me also. Why then have I been so very wise? And I said in my heart that this is also vanity. What's this thing that happens? For of the wise, of the fool, there is no enduring remembrance, seeing as in the days to come they will have been long forgotten, how the wise dies just like the fool. He fell into a despair, and we'll look at the despair here in a second. His concern was he realized that people die. He's going to die. Now, a fool might die earlier than what a wise person does because they're not paying attention to things that can keep them safe. But even the wisest person that ever lived, Solomon, died. Everybody is going to die, with the exception of Jesus and the few people that God had special connections with to be able to carry them out. But we all will die. And what happens after death? Keanu Reeves I like Keanu Reeves as an actor. He was on, I believe it was Colbert, being interviewed about something, and Colbert is a Catholic, I believe. And so he definitely believes in God in the afterlife, but Keanu Reeves is more spiritual, Buddhist, worldly. Well, both of them are worldly, but in context here. But Keanu was asked by Stephen Colbert, he said, what do you think happens to people after they die? And Keanu responded something that actually I think was very nice. He said, I think that the people that love us will miss us. And it was a very sweet way. But that's the very best that you got. In the world, if there is no purpose, and if there is no God, if there is no everything else, that's the best thing that we can hope for after we die, is that some people are going to miss us. But what's going to happen later is that those people that miss us are going to die too, and eventually you're going to reach a point where people are not going to remember who you are at all. Each of us are going to drift off into obscurity, or if we can create something beyond us that could be put in a history book, that might be the best thing that we've got. But even then, you become almost more legend than actual person at that point, because you're just reading about them in textbooks. Death is coming for everybody. And so are we wanting to be wise because we anticipate that we are going to be eternal? We are not. The only way that we continue and the only way that we are eternal is not of this life. It is of the spiritual life. There is a contentment that we need to seek that is not in finding carnal pleasures and temporary pleasures and finding a legacy because of physical things. It's finding a spiritual legacy. One of the greatest types of Christians that exist, all right, if I can be so bold as to say this, one of the best kinds of Christians that exist are the simple folk that just raise their family well in Jesus Christ. We read many great examples of prophets and priests and kings that did good things for God and told people about the message of Jesus Christ. We see all of those things, and yes, we absolutely 100% need people that are the bold evangelists and the speakers and the teachers to go out into the world. But when you have a family that, at the very least loves God, and you got parents that instill the love of God in them, and they instill it in such a way that it is part of their family legacy, and children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren are introduced to the Lord through that legacy, that is something that sticks. That is something that is beautiful. Yes, we should all be eager and strive to teach and to tell people about Jesus and to show it. But don't sell yourself short on what you are doing with your circle of influence. We can only really work with our circle of influence and try to do our best to help them. We are going to die, but what really matters is that we get people to come to heaven with us someday. So let's try to make that our goal. And so what was his reaction to it? Oh, he was not happy. So I hated life, because what is done under the sun was grievous to me, for all is vanity and striving after wind. He was after this pursuit of something bigger and better and making an impact on the world, but he's going to die. He's going to die. So he doesn't like that, doesn't want to do that. Very, very, very briefly. So is that 5-minute bell? Is that how that works? Okay. I think I can summarize this in 5 minutes. All right, verses 18 through 26. He talks about work in general. And really, that's what all of the other things have been about before. He is working for pleasures. He was striving for wisdom. It's this toil, this effort here. He says, I hated all my toil for which I toil under the sun, seeing that I must leave it to the man who will come after me. And who knows whether he'll be wise or a fool? Yet he will be master for all of which I have toiled and used my wisdom under the sun. This also is vanity. So I turned about and gave my heart up to despair over all the toil of my labors under the sun, because sometimes a person who has toiled with wisdom and knowledge and skill must leave everything to be enjoyed by somebody who did not toil for it. In other words, somebody who doesn't appreciate it. They don't know what it took. This is also vanity and a great evil. I like woodworking. I really enjoy woodworking. And I enjoy stuff. I collect stuff. I've got literally a wood collection that I've got made up. I know it's super bizarre, but I don't know where it came from, but hey, I collect wood. I turn them into little spheres. When your last name is Ball, you lean into it. And so I've got these collections. I got like 70 different kinds of wood. And so in some of these pieces, my aunt gave me a piece. She thought it was like a $10 piece. It was like a $50 piece of wood. And I'm like, all right, this is nice. I got pink ivory now, So I turn this. But every time I turn them, I have this thought in my head, which is, I have to be content that this is going to burn at the end of time. No matter how much you love something in this life, if it's something physical, as a good reminder for us, ask ourselves, am I content to watch this thing burn up at the end of time? Would it be nice? I highly doubt that people are going to enjoy a wood collection someday after I die, but somebody might. I kind of hope they do, because it's actually really cool. I can talk to people about that. But the truth is that, probably people are not going to appreciate that nearly as much as I do, because I'm the one that's working on it. We have to be okay that things are transient in this life. And it doesn't mean just give up. We don't have to be like Solomon here, where we just completely give into despair, because who knows what's going to happen after our lives. The key is that under the sun in this world, that's when we should have despair about these things. But when we know that there's something greater, when we know that there is an eternity in heaven awaiting us, that's whenever we can have a little bit more security about the temporary things in life. It's okay that they're temporary, because they're supposed to be temporary. There are greater things. So he got depressed. He said, what is a man from all the toil and striving of heart for which he toils beneath the sun? For all his days are full of sorrow, and his work is a vexation. Even in the night, his heart does not rest. This also is vanity. Has anybody had a job before that you can't take it? You can't leave it at work? It's like, I think pretty much everybody has had that at one time or another. A job that, you're exhausted and you're like, I just want to leave it at the workplace. But no, you are wide awake at night and thinking, man, I got to take care of this, that as soon as I get in tomorrow. And that is really troubling. It's exhausting. We don't want that kind of a thing. He's saying don't have that kind of toil, but then he's got a proposed solution. And this is really curious and a really hard time to stop the class, but it's important here. He says, there is nothing better for a person that he should eat and drink and find enjoyment in his toil. This also I saw is from the hand of God, for apart from him, who can eat and who can have enjoyment? For the one who pleases him, God has given wisdom and knowledge and joy, but to the sinner he has given the business of gathering and collecting only to give to the one who pleases God. This also is vanity and striving after wind. The short of that is there's two possible ways to explain that. One of them is to say that he is explaining the evil attitude of workers is just as bad as the one that he had as a person that had a lot of stuff. And it's this, well, just eat, drink, and be merry, and you'll be happy. That's one way of looking at it. The one that I tend to think of is he is not talking about anything sinful here. He's saying enjoy the simple pleasures. Find enjoyment because God has given us enjoyment in these things. That does not mean go out and drink alcohol. That is not what it's saying. It's saying, look, hey, if food tastes good, it tastes good. But recognize it in its place. It is a temporary blessing that God has given us. And we do have great little blessings from God that we should enjoy. Let's just approach them wisely and with heaven in sight. So, thank you very much for your time.